Hello, and a very warm welcome to you. Today, we're going to walk through a profoundly important chapter of history together. We are diving deep into Nelson Mandela's extraordinary autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom. We'll unpack all the dense vocabulary, the rich history, and the really deep philosophy of this text, step by step, so you can grasp every single detail perfectly.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with a historic inauguration day, look at the military pride and anthems, remember the history and unforgettable heroes, explore true courage and love, and finally end with twin obligations and freedom. We're essentially moving from a timeline of chronological events right into his deepest philosophical thoughts.
So let's get started with Section 1, a historic inauguration day.
Let's set the scene. The date is the 10th of May. It's a bright, clear autumn day, and we find ourselves at the lovely sandstone amphitheater formed by the Union buildings in Pretoria. Now, if you're trying to picture it, just think of the Grand Rashtrapati Bhavan or the Red Fort back home. Right at the very start of our text, Mandela notes he had been pleasantly besieged by dignitaries. Now, to be besieged usually means to be attacked or surrounded by an enemy, right? But here, it's used beautifully. He is pleasantly surrounded by world leaders coming to pay their absolute respect at this grand, roofless, open-air amphitheater.
Let's look at exactly how the swearing-in ceremony unfolded chronologically. It's such a historic day, and Mandela wasn't up there alone. He had his beloved daughter, Zenani, right by his side. First on the podium, Mr. de Klerk was sworn in as second deputy president. Following him, Thabo Mbeki was sworn in as first deputy president. And then finally, it was Nelson Mandela's turn to take the profound pledge as the president of a newly democratic, non-racial South Africa.
Mandela uses some incredibly powerful, but maybe slightly dense vocabulary in a speech. Let's break it down to make it super simple. He mentions that South Africans were once considered outlaws, which simply means they were diplomatically isolated by the entire world because of their racist policies. But on that day, their presence confers, or gives, glory and hope. He proudly declares they have achieved political emancipation, meaning true freedom from restriction. And he pledges to end deprivation, which is the state of lacking your rightful benefits, and to end all discrimination, which of course is the unfair, unfavorable treatment of anyone. Moving smoothly onto Section 2, military pride and anthems. After the speeches, the military, which used to be a very scary tool of oppression, demonstrated its brand new loyalty. The crowd looked up in pure awe at a spectacular array, that just means an incredibly impressive, colorful display of South African jets and helicopters. A chevron, or a V-shaped pattern of Impala jets, left a beautiful smoke trail in the new flag's colors. Then, the highest generals, covered in ribbons and medals, saluted Mandela. He specifically notes that he was not unmindful of, meaning he was extremely conscious and aware of, the fact that just a few years earlier, these exact same men would not have saluted him at all. They would have arrested him.
But the visuals were only half of it. This moment was further symbolized by the singing of two national anthems. It was just a beautiful picture of unity. The white citizens sang Nkosi Sikelel' Afrika, while the black citizens sang the Stem, which was actually the old anthem of the Republic. Now, Mandela knows that neither group actually knew the lyrics of the anthem they once despised, and despise is a very strong word, meaning to have a completely low opinion of something. But he knew, with total certainty, that very soon they would know these unifying words by heart.
This brings us to Section 3, history and unforgettable heroes.
Standing up there on that stage, Mandela was just overwhelmed with a massive sense of history. He thought back to the harsh, brutal decades following the Anglo-Boer War. Decades of systemic brutality had caused a profound hurt, a deeply felt, incredibly strong pain that will literally take generations to heal. However, this terrible oppression also wrought, which is just an old-fashioned word meaning done or achieved, a completely unintended effect. You see, the extreme pressure and immense suffering actually produced men of extraordinary courage and character. This is a really beautiful realization Mandela had. We remember towering historical figures like Yusuf Dadoo and Bram Fischer. Mandela says that yes, South Africa is incredibly rich in minerals and gems beneath its soil, but its absolutely greatest wealth is its people. People like these men are so much finer and so much truer than the purest diamonds ever mined from the earth. It is so crucial that we recognize and remember these exact names, just as Mandela did on that day. Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Chief Luthuli, Yusuf Dadoo, Bram Fischer, Robert Sobukwe. Mandela felt a really deep pain that he could not personally thank them. He felt that he was simply the sum of all these great, noble African patriots who had gone before him, paving the very ground he stood on with their unimaginable sacrifices.
Let's look at Section 4 now, True Courage and Love. Here, we really get into the philosophical core of the text.
Through all those bitter struggles alongside his comrades, Mandela learned profound, lasting lessons about human nature. During their time in the absolute grimmest of prisons, men and women stood up to severe torture without breaking. They showed unbelievable resilience, which is simply the ability to deal with severe hardship and bounce back from its effects. Even when they were pushed to our limits, meaning pushed to the absolute last possible point of their ability to bear physical and mental pain, they endured.
And that leads us to this absolutely defining quote from the text. Listen to this very carefully. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. This isn't just history. This is a massive life lesson for all of us. Fear is totally natural, but overcoming it, that is true bravery.
Mandela also made a deeply touching observation about love and hate. He realized that literally nobody is born hating another person because of their skin color. People have to be taught. They must learn to hate. And his logic is beautiful here. If they can learn to hate, they can surely be taught to love. Love just comes far more naturally to the human heart. Even in his darkest prison days, Mandela would see a brief glimmer of humanity in one of his guards. Just 1 second of kindness, and that tiny spark was enough to keep him going.
Okay, we've reached our final part, Section 5, Twin Obligations and Freedom.
In this final section, we explore a really great internal conflict Mandela faced. He explains that every single person has twin obligations in life. First, your obligation to your personal family, your parents, your wife, your children. Second, your obligation to your broader family, your people, your community, your country. Now, in a normal, humane society, a person can balance both of these. But in South Africa, for a man of color, fulfilling both was completely, utterly impossible.
If a man tried to fulfill his duty according to his inclinations, which just means his natural tendencies as a human, he was punished. If he tried to serve his people, he was inevitably or unavoidably ripped away from his family. He was forced into what Mandela so beautifully and tragically calls a twilight existence, a life lived apart in the shadows, in secrecy and rebellion. He didn't ever want to abandon his family, but the struggle simply forced him to choose. Over the years, his very understanding of freedom evolved tremendously. As a little boy, he honestly thought he was free, but that freedom was just an illusion, something that appeared real but absolutely wasn't. As a student, he only cared about transitory freedoms, freedoms that are temporary, like just being able to stay out at night. But as a young adult, he realized his basic, honorable freedoms were curtailed, meaning heavily reduced. And it was this realization that finally sparked his great burning hunger for freedom that simply cannot be divided.
This is the great realization that transformed him from a frightened young man into a bold, world-changing leader. He came to realize freedom is indivisible. The chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me. He could not enjoy his own limited freedom, knowing his brothers and sisters were still suffering in chains.
Now, in his final thoughts, Mandela makes a brilliant and honestly quite unexpected comparison. We all know the oppressed person is robbed of their freedom, right? That's obvious. But Mandela argues that the oppressor, the one actually doing the hurting, must also be liberated. Why? Because a man who takes away another person's freedom becomes a prisoner himself. He becomes a prisoner of his own deep hatred. Because you see, the oppressor is locked behind heavy bars of prejudice. Let's define that carefully. Prejudice is a strong, deeply ingrained dislike without any good logical reason. The oppressor is locked behind prejudice and narrow-mindedness. By taking away someone else's humanity, the oppressor actively destroys their own humanity as well. Both sides, the oppressed and the oppressor, are fundamentally robbed. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today, and I really want to leave you with a deeply moving question drawn straight from Mandela's heart. Are you truly free if you are taking away someone else's freedom? I want you to reflect deeply on this as you study this chapter. True liberation isn't just about breaking physical chains. It's about breaking the chains of hatred in our own minds. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and keep reading carefully.